Beloved gay cult film icon Udo Kier dies at 81.
A chill swept through the film world today as Lars von Trier finally broke his silence on the sudden death of Udo Kier. In a statement that stunned collaborators, his voice trembled with a mix of grief, disbelief, and something far more complicated. Was this long-guarded tension between them the real trigger, or did a buried industry secret force von Trier to speak now? Crew members are shaken, insiders are whispering, and one urgent question hangs in the air. Why now? Because what he reveals next changes everything. A shadow only a friend could describe. Cinema shook on the 23rd of November 2025, not with applause or the rise of a new masterpiece, but with a silence so heavy it felt like a curtain falling across the world. Udo Kier, the legendary German actor whose name had become a symbol of strangeness, beauty, danger, and irresistible mystery, was gone at 81. His partner, Delbert McBride, confirmed it in a voice the industry instantly recognized as carrying both love and shock. It was a quiet exit for a man who had never once lived in quietness, and that contrast alone spread a cold, unsettled ripple through every corner of film culture. What made the moment even more haunting was the reaction of Lars von Trier. Those who had worked with him throughout his career said his silence in the hours after the news felt like something breaking beneath the surface. To many, Udo Kier had been a collaborator. To von Trier, he had been something closer, an anchor, a mirror, a wild, unpredictable creative partner who understood the strange music inside his films without needing translation. Their bond went deeper than directors and actors. It carried the weight of decades spent pushing boundaries, provoking audiences, and holding on to each other through storms both artistic and personal. As tributes poured in, people remembered Udo's unforgettable eyes first, the way they could freeze a room or make a simple line sound like a warning wrapped in poetry. His face wasn't just expressive, it was mythic. Even in films where he spoke little, he commanded every shadow, every breath, every unspoken thought. He was the kind of actor who didn't perform roles. He consumed them, shaped them, and then left them forever changed. But what the public didn't see were the private conversations, the long nights on set, the arguments that turned into laughter, the sudden bursts of tenderness between two artists who operated at the edge of normality. Lars von Trier had spent years insisting that Udo wasn't just part of his storytelling, he was part of his life. And now, the pain in von Trier's voice made it clear that this loss was not a simple moment of remembrance. It was a fracture. People noted how von Trier spoke of him, slowly, carefully, as though choosing each word meant stepping across a thin sheet of ice. He described Udo as someone born out of the borders, a performer who didn't belong to Hollywood or Europe, horror or art house, the grotesque or the divine, but somehow belonged to all of them at once. His career had always escaped labels. His presence had always bent rules. In the days that followed, von Trier's reflections carried a strange mixture of tribute and something more troubling, something unspoken. He hinted at conversations they had never shared with the public, at plans they had quietly held on to, at truths only partners in art and life could understand. And it was in those hints, those fragile pauses, that a new question began to rise around the industry, a question no one yet dared to articulate fully. But what was the final thing Udo Kier told Lars von Trier, and why did it leave him so shaken? Stay tuned. The boy pulled from fire. To understand the weight behind Lars von Trier's voice when he speaks of Udo Kier, one must go back to the very beginning, back to a moment so violent and unlikely that it shaped everything the world would later see in Udo's extraordinary performances. Von Trier often said that Udo did not simply enter the cinema. He arrived carrying the mark of survival, a strange and powerful light that came from living through what most people could never imagine. And in his grief, von Trier kept returning to that origin, as if the key to their lifelong bond began in that first breath. Udo Kier was born on the 14th of October 1944 in Cologne, Germany.
Udo Kier was born on the 14th of October 1944 in Cologne, Germany.
During the last brutal months of the Second World War, He entered the world just moments before the hospital was struck in a bombing. In the chaos, newborn Udo and his mother were trapped beneath collapsed walls and crumbling stone. By every rule of chance, they should not have been found. Yet rescuers uncovered them alive, pulling them from rubble that still smoked with dust and fire. That miracle, Lars von Trier believed, determined the strange energy Udo carried throughout his life, a mix of fragility and unbreakable strength, innocence wrapped in danger, beauty touched by darkness. He grew up without a father, raised solely by his mother, in a Germany struggling to find shape again after war. Though hardship marked those years, there was also tenderness. Udo first discovered performance in the most unexpected places. He sang as a cantor, served as an altar boy, and learned how a single note or gesture could move a room into silence. Even later, when he would dive into roles that were eerie, bizarre, or deeply unsettling, von Trier always saw the same quiet spiritual thread running underneath. Udo knew how to turn his voice into a spell, and his face into a question no one could easily answer. At 18, restless and hungry for a world beyond the ruins he had known, Udo left Germany for London, determined to learn English. He had almost no money, no clear plan, and no guarantee that anyone would care about a young man with a heavy accent and eyes that seemed to hold too many stories. But that decision, simple, bold, and entirely instinctive, opened the door to a career that would stretch for 6 decades, crossing borders, languages, styles, and genres. Hundreds of films followed. Some were cult classics, others art house provocations, and some were bold experiments that only a few directors would dare attempt. And among those directors, one name always stood closest to him: Lars von Trier. Von Trier often spoke of Udo's early life with a mixture of awe and personal sorrow, as if recounting the creation myth of someone he considered family. In interviews, he would describe Udo's survival as the first chapter of a story that never stopped being unbelievable. Now, after losing him, von Trier's memories carry a sharper edge, an awareness that Udo had been shaped by fire long before cinema claimed him. But in sharing these memories, von Trier hints at something else too, something that makes those who listen pause, lean in, and wonder. And what part of Udo's beginnings did he reveal only to Lars? And why does that memory seem to trouble him now? Stay glued. The face. The camera could never escape. When Lars von Trier speaks about Udo Kier's rise in cinema, it is with the tone of someone describing a storm he witnessed up close, an unpredictable, electrifying force that reshaped everything in its path. To von Trier, Udo didn't become an actor. He simply stepped into a world that had been waiting for a face like his, a face that could whisper, accuse, seduce, threaten, or break your heart without moving a single muscle. It was the face that would soon make him unforgettable. Udo's formal journey began in 1966 with Road to Saint-Tropez, a modest start that barely hinted at what was coming. The real shift arrived in the early 1970s, when he took on the notorious roles of Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula. Those films, wild, daring, and soaked in strange beauty, turned him into something rare, a cult phenomenon. Suddenly, Udo Kier was the haunting centerpiece of Europe's underground cinema, a performer who could make audiences feel fascination and fear at the same time. What set him apart, Lars von Trier always insisted, was not the characters he played, but the courage he brought to them. Udo was not merely fearless. He was committed in ways that made directors rethink what a scene could be. He slipped between moods and identities with an ease that felt almost supernatural. One moment he was vicious, the next, heartbreakingly vulnerable. At times he was seductive, at other times unsettlingly unfamiliar, yet always utterly human. Underneath the strangeness, no role frightened him, no script was too strange, no emotional corner was too dark. This fearlessness attracted the boldest directors of their generations: Rainer Werner Fassbinder, Werner Herzog, Gus Van Sant, Dario Argento, Guy Maddin, Alexander Payne, and of course Lars von Trier himself. They saw in Udo what audiences instinctively understood. He could bring poetry to horror, elegance to madness, fragility to villains, and a kind of deliberate chaos to every frame he touched. He didn't fit into a mold. He broke it with style. Even in Hollywood, where faces flicker in and out of memory, Udo Kier refused to fade into the background. He appeared in Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, Armageddon, My Own Private Idaho, Barbed Wire, Downsizing, and The Adventures of Pinocchio, among many others. And even if viewers couldn't always recall his name, they never forgot the presence, the way he entered a scene like someone carrying a secret only he understood. Across decades, he became a master of the uncanny: vampires, prophets, demons, sorcerers, killers, figures who felt older than cinema itself. Lars von Trier often joked that Udo didn't play these roles. He summoned them. There was something ancient in his performances, something that whispered of old stories and forgotten myths. And then came a different kind of fame, one that belonged not to movie theaters, but to the glowing screens of gamers around the world. As Yuri in Command & Conquer, Red Alert 2, he crafted one of the most iconic villains in strategy game history. His voice, cold, smooth, hypnotic,
mind, body, and if you like, soul,
became instantly recognizable. A simple line from Udo could take command of an entire scene. But in private, Lars von Trier hinted at something else, something he never fully explained. He spoke of a shift he noticed late in Udo's career, a strange restlessness, a quiet urgency that didn't match the confidence the world saw on screen. Von Trier never revealed what triggered it, only that Udo mentioned it to him during one of their final conversations. And now, with Udo gone, that single unanswered moment lingers between von Trier's memories like a shadow. Now, what did Udo Kier sense in those last years? And why did he trust Lars von Trier to hear it? Keep watching. The life he refused to dim. When Lars von Trier remembers Udo Kier, he does not begin with the films, the fame, or the unforgettable characters that shaped an entire corner of cinema. He begins with Udo's courage, quiet, unwavering, and uncompromising. To von Trier, that was the real core of his friend's life. A man who refused to make himself small for a world that often insisted he should. A man who chose truth even when it cost him roles, opportunities, or the simple comfort of safety. Udo lived openly as a gay man during a time when the film industry punished such honesty.
Gay Hollywood and art house legend Udo Kier has...
There were whispers, there were warnings, and there were moments when people advised him to tone it down, to adopt a more marketable image, to hide what made him different. But Udo rejected every suggestion. He would not trade authenticity for acceptance. He would not apologize for who he was. And Lars von Trier admired that defiance deeply, because he knew how rare it was, especially for someone whose face was already so recognizable, whose presence already carried such weight. In 1991, Udo left behind Europe's cold winters and settled into the sun-soaked quiet of Palm Springs, a place that quickly became more than a home. It became a sanctuary. He built a life filled with art that spilled across his walls, plants that grew wildly under his care, and friends who understood the gentleness behind his intensity. For someone born under falling bombs and raised in the long shadow of war, Palm Springs offered something he had never fully known before: peace. Lars von Trier often joked that it was the only place where Udo's wild spirit slowed down enough for him to breathe without urgency. That calmness followed him into his final years. And when the world woke to the news that Udo Kier passed away on the 23rd of November, 2025, at 81, it felt as if a chapter of cinematic rebellion had quietly closed. His partner, Delbert McBride, confirmed the loss with a statement as soft and private as Udo's final moments. He said that Udo passed away quietly, a phrase that struck Lars von Trier more deeply than he expected. Quietly. A word so unlike the man who had spent decades filling screens with shock, wonder, and emotion that refused containment. His death was officially declared a natural death, and no further details were released, reflecting his lifelong desire for privacy. Udo had always believed that while his art belonged to the world, his ending did not. Even at the height of his fame, he protected a part of himself from the noise of public attention. Lars von Trier respected that boundary, even now, even as grief pushes him to say more than he should. But what von Trier cannot ignore, and what he rarely discusses, is the memory of their last conversation. It happened weeks before Udo's passing, a simple exchange on the surface, but with something underneath that von Trier still cannot shake. Something unspoken that now feels heavier with every passing day. He has not revealed the full truth of that final moment. He may never. Yet the way his voice tightens when he mentions it suggests there was more behind Udo Kier's quiet exit than the world has been allowed to hear. But what hidden truth did Udo Kier reveal to Lars von Trier in their final conversation? And why does it still haunt him today? Stay with us. The man who turned mystery into light. As Lars von Trier speaks about Udo Kier, his voice carries the weight of someone remembering not just a colleague, but a man who shaped the rhythm of his life. To von Trier, Udo was never simply an actor performing within the boundaries of a script. He was a force, quiet when he chose to be, explosive when a scene demanded it, and always unpredictable in ways that made everyone around him better. His absence now feels like a room with its light switch removed. You keep reaching for it, expecting brightness, only to be reminded of what is gone. Udo Kier never had biological children, but he built a family far more intimate than blood. His world was formed out of directors who trusted him, actors who leaned on him, and artists who found in him a kind of gentle mentor, wrapped in eccentric charm. On a film set, he was the grounding presence, never the loudest, never the most demanding, yet somehow the center of gravity. Lars von Trier saw this countless times. Udo could walk into a room filled with chaos, with cameras glitching, tempers rising, and schedules collapsing, and somehow, simply by being there, he pulled the tension out of the air. For him, sets were not workplaces. They were small, temporary families. And von Trier always felt that Udo's deepest loyalty was to the fragile magic that existed between action and cut. He found something sacred in the lens itself. Udo often told von Trier that the camera never lied, even when the actor did. It saw truth, weakness, arrogance, and pain. It saw hunger, longing, and fear. And because of that, he treated every scene as if it were a confession. Perhaps that was why audiences across generations stayed attached to him.
This room is terrible, and it's full of light.
He gave them pieces of himself without ever saying they were his. His legacy now stretches like a constellation across more than 6 decades of cinema. Udo Kier leaves behind one of the most astonishing bodies of work the screen has ever held. He was not simply memorable, he was impossible to forget. A myth disguised as a man, a storm disguised as a performance. He could appear in a 5-minute role and reshape the entire mood of a film, turning a small moment into something that echoed long after the credits. He never cared about being the lead. He cared about being the haunting presence, the strange heartbeat, the shadow that made the light more interesting. Udo redefined what it meant to be eccentric in cinema. Where others used oddness as decoration, he used it as a language. He became the blueprint for characters who lived on the edge of human understanding. The mysterious, the uncanny, the beautifully strange. He proved that cinematic immortality does not belong only to heroes. Sometimes it belongs to the enigma who appears, unsettles the audience, and leaves them wondering what they just witnessed. Lars von Trier feels this contrast more sharply now, as he reflects on decades of shared memories. When he first directed Udo, he expected intensity, and he got that, but he also got tenderness, humor, and a surprising vulnerability hidden behind the legendary glare. Sometimes, between takes, Udo would tell stories that felt too surreal to be real. Childhood memories, distant travels, odd encounters, things half-whispered, as if they were private spells. And von Trier has hinted more than once that one of those stories, told on a quiet evening near the end of Udo's life, still bothers him. He will not repeat it. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. But something in the way he pauses when Udo's name is mentioned suggests that the final piece of Kier's myth, the part only Lars von Trier heard, may shift how the world remembers him once it finally comes to light. Could Lars von Trier's final secret from Udo Kier change everything we know about the legend? What do you think it might reveal? The eternal frame of Udo Kier. Lars von Trier recalls Udo Kier not as a figure frozen in history, but as a living force whose presence reshaped every space he entered. From the moment von Trier first met him on a chaotic European set, he knew Udo was extraordinary, not simply because of talent, but because of the way life had forged him. Udo's first breath came beneath falling bombs, a moment that seemed to mark him for survival, resilience, and the extraordinary intensity he would carry for the rest of his life. Von Trier often says that there is something indestructible about a man who began life under rubble, and with Udo, it was undeniable. The young Udo fled a Germany still raw from war, seeking language, freedom, and possibilities in London at 18, unaware that the choice would open doors to decades of international cinema, from his earliest films to his cult breakthroughs in the 1970s. Including Flesh for Frankenstein and Blood for Dracula, he emerged not just as an actor, but as a presence, strange, captivating, and unforgettable. Directors across Europe and America gravitated toward him. They sensed what von Trier recognized immediately, a performer who transformed space, who bent every frame to his will, who made even minor roles feel monumental. Udo's brilliance lay in his ability to exist on multiple planes at once. He could be terrifying and tender, grotesque and divine, absurd and deeply human, all within the span of a single scene. Lars von Trier notes that few actors possess such control over tone, emotion, and expectation. He did not simply act, he inhabited archetypes older than cinema itself, leaving audiences unsettled, mesmerized, and often speechless. Hollywood could never contain him, though he moved through it gracefully, leaving indelible impressions in films like Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, Armageddon, and My Own Private Idaho.
Oh, hi, Ryan.
Glad you could make it.
Thank you.
You look wonderful.
And yet, von Trier insists Udo's greatest magic was never on the marquee. It was in the spaces between lines, the pauses, the glances, the very way he shaped reality with presence alone. Outside the camera's eye, Udo cultivated a life of beauty, art, and chosen family. In Palm Springs, where he settled in 1991, he surrounded himself with artists, friends, and the quiet wonders that had eluded him as a child. Lush gardens, sunlit rooms, and a sense of home he had longed for since surviving the rubble of Cologne. Lars von Trier often remarks that Udo's sanctuary was a reflection of the man himself, rich, layered, and brimming with unexpected depth. He was fiercely honest, living openly as a gay man at a time when honesty carried cost, yet never shrinking, never compromising, never apologizing for existing fully. When Udo passed away quietly on the 23rd of November 2025, at 81, confirmed by his partner Delbert McBride, the world of cinema felt the absence of its most enigmatic presence. Officially declared a natural death, it was the end of a life lived without pretense, without spectacle.
Gay Hollywood and art house legend Udo Kier has died at 81. His partner Delbert McBride confirmed the news.
Yet in a way that left every frame he touched unforgettable. Lars von Trier mourns not only a collaborator, but family. A friend whose story, resilience, and brilliance carry on through every film, every performance, and every audience memory he shaped. Even as the curtain falls on Udo Kier's life, Lars von Trier reflects that something endures beyond grief, beyond memory. The eternal frame he inhabited, the myth he became, and the unspoken truths they shared in moments few others witnessed. In von Trier's eyes, the story is not over. It waits, poised, in shadows and light, in frames yet to be watched, in mysteries yet to be understood. And somewhere in that quiet, there remains a question Lars cannot shake. What final piece of himself did Udo leave behind for only him to hold? So how did Udo Kier's final private revelations to Lars von Trier reshape their bond? And what secrets remain hidden from the world, waiting to be uncovered? From first glance to lifelong bond, Lars von Trier often recalls the moment he first saw Udo Kier on a festival screen as something that shifted his understanding of cinema forever. It was at the Mannheim Film Festival in Germany during the opening night. Udo had a short film called Last Trip to Harrisburg, and von Trier was there with other directors from around the world, quietly observing when he noticed something unusual. As the lights dimmed for his new feature Epidemic, von Trier expected the typical presence of older, serious directors, figures like Fassbinder or other legends, dressed in black, poised, critical. But instead, a young, unassuming filmmaker entered, brimming with energy, curiosity, and confidence. It was Lars von Trier himself, though at that time he could not have imagined how deeply this encounter would shape both their lives. Von Trier remembers being struck by Udo, not just as an actor, but as someone who seemed untamed by convention. Udo had never attended acting school. He learned from observing, from feeling, from daring, to put himself completely into the moment. When von Trier saw him on that screen, he realized that Udo's presence was magnetic, even when subtle. There was a curiosity in his eyes, a raw honesty in his performance that could captivate without artifice, a gift von Trier recognized immediately. Weeks later, this recognition turned into collaboration. Von Trier called Udo to discuss a role in Medea from Car R. Udo recalls that von Trier wanted him to play the husband of Medea, but there was a problem. He did not look like a Viking. The solution was both unusual and unforgettable. Udo was instructed not to wash his hair for 3 weeks, not to shave, and to arrive in Denmark prepared to embody a king of the Vikings. When he arrived, strange, unkempt, and striking, von Trier immediately saw what he had imagined, the raw, magnetic presence that would carry the film. From that point, their relationship became far more than professional. Von Trier would later witness Udo's generosity, humor, and loyalty firsthand. He became godfather to von Trier's child, shared countless conversations over beers, and developed a creative partnership that spanned 3 decades. Udo was never just an actor to von Trier. He was a friend, a partner in creation, a presence whose unpredictability and depth constantly challenged and inspired him. Looking back, von Trier often says that meeting Udo was one of the luckiest events of his life, not because of fame, awards, or recognition, but because in Udo he found a kindred spirit, a man fearless in his truth, endlessly inventive, and willing to meet life with honesty and intensity. Every scene they created together, every frame they shared, carried the weight of that bond. And it is that bond, intimate, extraordinary, enduring, that von Trier feels most acutely now, as the world reflects on Udo Kier's incredible life and legacy. So what do you think Lars von Trier discovered in Udo Kier's final words? Were they truths that could rewrite everything we thought we knew about his life? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.